Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 869, and today's date is January 17th, 2016, and the title of the episode is The Current Economic Collapse News Brief. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. Tomorrow, January 18th, I'll be uploading an interview with James Corbett. We talk about global warming and what the real agenda is. If you are on the X22Report.com email alert system, you'll get an email. If you're on the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel and you subscribe there, you should get an email from YouTube. If not, you can come right over to YouTube to view the video, or you can come over to the X22Report.com site, scroll down a little bit, you'll see the video on the right-hand side once it's posted. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, last week, during that week, we had the market, which was way down. We had the president come out telling us that we're in a recovery, the economy's doing well, and those people who didn't agree are peddling fiction and were fools. And then what happened was the market crashed even further, and we saw the Atlanta Fed come out at the close of the market saying that, yeah, we revised our predictions, and it looks like GDP is going to be around 0.6%. Well, JP Morgan has just chimed in, and they are saying, well, it looks like U.S. growth has come to a screeching halt, and we're going to revise our GDP numbers, and the GDP numbers are 0.1% for the fourth quarter of 2015. And what's very interesting about all this is that during 2014, going into 2015, the IMF, the United States government, the central bankers, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, they all gave their predictions on how GDP was going to be 3.5%, 3%, and as we went throughout the year, they continually lowered it as time went on. And here we are at the end of 2015, and the holiday season was a complete disaster, and now the GDP numbers are worse than anyone thought they would be. And all their predictions are completely the opposite of what they were telling us. So we can see right now that this economy is going absolutely nowhere. All the indicators, and most of them right now, are even worse than we were in 2008 and 2009. So moving forward, this is not going to get any better. Actually, things are going to crumble apart and fall apart. We'll have to see how the markets react this evening, because we know the Asian markets open first, then they move to the Europe, and then they hit the United States, and we'll have to watch these to see how things are going to go, if things are continually going to slide downward, or is the high-frequency plunge protection team going to step in with more free money from the Fed and really pump up the markets to keep them from dropping right now, because as we know, they don't want this happening without them controlling it and bringing it down. Now, as we know, back on December 2nd, NATO issued a formal invitation for Montenegro to join the military bloc, and the government went and said, "Oh, okay, we'll do this." But the people of the country said, "Well, wait a minute. We're not so sure that we want to join NATO." And we saw protests across Montenegro, and at this point, it looks like they're going to have a national referendum to determine if the country should swing towards NATO. And we'll have to watch that very carefully to see what happens there. North Korea is reporting that they want a peace treaty with the United States. Now, as we know, the United States government central bankers, they've been using propaganda to convince us that there's nuclear explosions creating these earthquakes. But of course, they haven't put forth any proof whatsoever. They have absolutely nothing. But of course, what they've been doing since then is continually pushing propaganda, increasing military budgets, provoking North Korea any way they possibly can. And North Korea is saying they are willing to suspend all nuclear testing in return for a peace treaty to end the Korean War. And they want the U.S. military to stop with the exercises near their country. The U.S. turned around and said, "No, we reject that. We are not going to look at the peace proposal right now, and we are not going to stop with the military exercises. We will continue with this because we have commitments with South Korea, and we just can't stop this for something called peace, which is absolutely ridiculous. It's something so ridiculous that they won't even look at. I mean, they're asking for peace. Maybe, just maybe, the United States should say, well, wait a minute, okay, you're asking for peace, you'll stop all nuclear testing, and all we need to do is stop extra. Okay, let's pursue this. But they rejected it flat out. I mean, we'll have to see how things turn out as time goes on, but right now, it is completely rejected. Right now, the United States has allocated about $23 million of aid to Ukraine, and they are bringing in medical communication equipment, and it will be delivered to the Ukrainian military units participating in the training, which is being conducted by the U.S. instructors, so they will be getting that aid. Austria right now, they are suspending the Schengen Agreement. They're saying that there is just too many refugees coming into their country, there are no controls, and they need to take control of what is going on. They're saying all refugees must be controlled, economic migrants must be sent to the countries of their origin, and they are implementing strict monitoring systems for asylum seekers. And they said that we can't depend on these open borders. Each country at this point needs to take control of what is happening on their borders, and it looks like they are definitely moving towards that area at this time. Now we know that the Iran sanctions, they are being lifted because the IAEA has come out and they have confirmed that Iran has complied with its commitments under the agreement, the P5+1 agreement, which they discussed. So they're lifting all the sanctions at this time. And we have to remember, this whole agreement that the United States is making with Iran really has nothing to do with nuclear weapons and them creating a nuclear bomb, because Iran has signed the IAEA agreement. They are under the nuclear proliferation agreement, and they have inspections all the time. This is about placing the United States dollar on their oil reserves and having Iran use the dollar to sell their oil. This is what it's all about. And we're going to have to watch this very carefully, because we realize that once Iran decides not to do this and they decide to use the ruble, the yuan, and other currencies to sell their oil, this is when trouble is going to occur in Iran from the United States. This is when they're going to say, okay, enough is enough, we're going in there. And you have to remember, we have two different entities that are putting a lot of pressure on Iran right now. We have foreign governments like Israel, which is pushing Congress to continually place sanctions on Iran. And then we have the central bankers that want to keep the system going, which is controlling the White House, where they want a central bank and they want the dollar on the oil reserves of Iran. And this is why we're seeing these little type of incidents happen, because they're trying to gin something up to make sure that these sanctions stay in place. And they want to make sure, this is coming from the foreign governments, to make sure that a war is started somehow, some way. But so far it has failed. But right now, because of the testing of their ballistic missiles, the U.S. Treasury, as they're removing sanction, has decided to place sanctions on Iran because of their ballistic missile testing. Which is completely ridiculous, because where did this get the United States and Iran? They're back to the same area. So they imposed sanctions on 11 companies and individuals for helping to supply Iran's ballistic missile program. So they're removing sanctions, they're adding sanctions, and we can see at this point there is so much conflict between either side, because we have two different powers controlling the United States government. And if Iran does not basically meet the obligations of the White House, which is controlled by the central bankers, and they don't place their oil on the dollar, we're going to go to war. If Iran continues down the path that they're going, which is a peaceful path, the foreign governments are going to continually to try to provoke Iran and try to push war. So it's a no-win situation at this point, and we're going to have to watch this very carefully. We see the Islamic State in Deir ez-Zor has abducted at least 400 civilians after attacking government-held areas, and they have captured children, family members, pro-regime fighters, and we'll have to watch this because, as we know, they're most likely using them as human shields, so this way Russia, the Syrian armed forces, can't hit them. Russia right now is helping the Syrian army prepare for one of their major offensives. They're going into Aleppo, and Aleppo is divided now between government control in the west and rebel control in the east. The broader province is split as well, with ISIS largely in the east and rebel groups and Syria al-Qaeda affiliate al-Nusra in the west. But with the backing from Russia, airstrikes and foreign fighters, Syria's armed forces are slowly advancing south and southeast of the city. This will be the biggest military operation in Syria since the beginning of the war. Russia is also beefing up its defensive measures. They are bringing in their Ka-52 attack helicopters, and Russia is bringing in a new warfare system, and this new system will be able to protect their helicopters from anti-aircraft threats in a range of several hundred kilometers, and basically it will shield them against man-pads and other type of projectiles heading towards these helicopters. So we're going to have to see what happens, because if the Islamic State, which is the proxy arm of the United States government central bankers, if they lose Aleppo completely, basically what's happened is that Assad has really taken back the country here, and the United States with the proxy army is basically being pushed continuously out of the country, and they will be done. And this is why we're looking at all these different angles that the United States government central bankers are trying to use to demonize Assad, with him with the starving of his people, using barrel bombs, using chemical weapons. They're trying everything they possibly can to continually convince everyone that Assad must go, and that's their goal. That will never change. Turkey right now is pleading with the Pentagon to help train fighters to secure the borders. They want to set up a safe zone inside Syria. They've already talked to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joseph Dunford, to help with the training. And we're going to have to watch this very carefully, because if the United States agrees and they set up the safe zone inside Syria, this is the first step where they'll say this is no longer part of Syria. This is a safe area where we can keep the refugees. We can bring in troops from Turkey. We can bring troops in from the UK, from the United States, to guard these refugees. And they'll be starting to split up Syria. And we know Russia will not want this to happen, so we're going to have to watch that scenario very, very carefully. Now, the U.S. military is expanding its secret intelligence operations across Africa, establishing a network of small air bases. At the heart of the surveillance operations are small, unarmed turboprop aircraft disguised as private planes. They're equipped with hidden sensors that can record full-motion video, track infrared heat patterns, and vacuum up radio and cell phone signals. The planes refuel on isolated airstrips, and we can see right now the United States is expanding its operations in Africa. And you have to remember, wherever Russia and China are, this is why the United States is there. They're trying to establish bases all around Africa, maintain control of their natural resources, because this is what the private Western central bankers do. Wherever there are natural resources and they need these natural resources, they will go in, they will use terrorism, they will use force, they will use any way they possibly can to get these areas. And we've been seeing it in Sudan, we've been seeing it in Nigeria, we've been seeing it in all of these places. Instead of making economic deals, they are stuck now with using terrorism because the system is coming down, and this is what they have left. And we can see they're expanding throughout Africa, and they are preparing and setting up military targets, spying on all the locals, making sure China and Russia aren't in these areas. And we can see at this point in time that everything is starting to heat up right now. We see throughout the globe where aid is coming into Ukraine now, military aid, which is non-lethal and lethal weapons. We see in the Middle East, things are a complete disaster there. And we see out in the Pacific and Africa, everything is starting to heat up. Why? Because the economy is starting to disintegrate. The economy cannot be sustained. The United States government central bankers know this. Everything has been done in preparation for war. They've been moving military assets all over the place, and they are preparing, getting ready for the next phase. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.